Peter Holloway stood by the large window of his law office, gazing out over the busy city that served as both his playground and battlefield. At 55, he was at the peak of his career, a formidable attorney renowned for winning cases that seemed unwinnable. Peter's personal life appeared to reflect the perfection of his professional successes. He resided in a lovely house in a wealthy area, a testament to years of hard work and commitment. His wife, Sherry, was the epitome of sophistication and charm, the perfect counterpart to his ambitious spirit. The story of Peter and Sherry's relationship was one of chance and romance. They met at a charity gala more than 2 decades ago, where Peter was immediately drawn to Sherry's intelligence and warmth. Their romance was a whirlwind of dinners at fine dining restaurants, long walks in the park, and weekends spent visiting art galleries and theaters. They married within a year, and their wedding was a lavish event attended by friends, family, and Peter's colleagues from the legal field. Over the years, Peter and Sherry crafted a life filled with shared dreams and mutual respect. They traveled the globe together, hosted sophisticated gatherings, and were active in their community, known for their philanthropy and charm. Their social circle included well-known figures from the legal, business, and arts sectors, all of whom admired the couple's dedication to one another and their shared vision for the future. As the annual family dinner approached, Peter found himself filled with anticipation. This gathering was a treasured tradition, an opportunity to unite loved ones and celebrate the ties of family and friendship. This year, Peter had an extra reason to look forward to the event. He had significant news to share, something he believed would bring even more happiness to their lives. However, in the days leading up to the dinner, Peter began to notice subtle shifts in Sherry's behavior. Initially, they were minor things: missed phone calls, vague reasons for returning home late, a certain aloofness in her gaze during their conversations. Peter's instincts, sharpened from years of distinguishing truth from lies, sensed that something was wrong. The worry gnawed at him, an unrelenting discomfort that he couldn't dismiss. Sherry's increasing secrecy became more evident. She started spending more nights out, citing work obligations or impromptu plans with friends. When Peter asked about these absences, her responses were often short, lacking the warmth and openness that had once characterized their interactions. The once lively conversations at dinner became silent, each absorbed in their own thoughts, an invisible barrier gradually forming between them. As a lawyer, Peter was trained to be perceptive, to notice details that others might overlook. His mind began assembling the inconsistencies in Sherry's stories, constructing a puzzle that he was determined to solve discreetly. He began collecting information quietly, his systematic approach aiding him well in this personal probe. Peter discreetly reviewed phone logs and credit card records, noting unfamiliar charges and calls to unknown numbers. His heart sank as he uncovered a pattern that hinted at a clandestine life unfolding beneath the surface of their marriage. Each clue was a strike, weakening the foundation of trust they had built over the years. One evening, while Sherry was out, Peter sat at his desk examining the data he had amassed. His hands trembled slightly as he opened her laptop, searching for confirmation of his worst fears. It didn't take long for him to discover what he was looking for: text messages between Sherry and a man named Gerald. Their conversations were filled with a closeness and intimacy that deeply hurt Peter. As he read through the messages, Peter experienced a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, disbelief. The words on the screen starkly contradicted the life he believed they shared, a revelation that threatened to destroy everything he cherished. Yet, even in the midst of this chaos, Peter's mind started to plan his next steps. His legal training urged him to stay calm and tactical. He understood that confronting Sherry in anger would be futile. Instead, he decided to collect more evidence to grasp the full scope of her disloyalty before acting. Peter's mind, always the tactician, began devising a strategy to keep him in command of the situation and safeguard his interests. As the family dinner approached, Peter prepared himself for the upcoming challenge. He would continue to act the part of a devoted husband while covertly setting up a plan to hold Sherry responsible for her misconduct. The storm was forming, and Peter was equipped to confront it directly, ready to come out of the ordeal stronger and more insightful. The day of the family dinner arrived, sunny and clear. However, inside Peter Holloway's heart, a storm was gathering strength. As he readied himself for the event, he couldn't dispel the feelings of excitement and dread enveloping him. This dinner, usually a celebration of family and friendship, now bore a different meaning for him, a platform from which he would start to untangle the web of lies enveloping his life. Peter spent the morning perfecting the final details in the dining room, ensuring everything looked impeccable. The table was adorned with elegant crystal and candles that softly flickered, enhancing the room's sophisticated decor. The scent of roasted lamb and fresh herbs filled the air, blending with the subtle strains of classical music in the background. To any onlooker, it was the epitome of a happy home, a gathering of close ones sharing in the season's joy. Yet, beneath that facade, Peter felt the chill of betrayal. Over the last few days, he had carefully planned how to address Sherry and Gerald, considering every potential scenario. His training as a lawyer taught him the importance of a calm, strategic approach. As the evening approached, he steeled himself, determined to stay composed regardless of what unfolded. As guests began arriving, Peter welcomed them with his usual charm, shaking hands and making polite conversation effortlessly. His smile remained unflinching, even as his mind was fraught with the revelations he had uncovered. As he mingled with the guests, ensuring everyone felt at ease, he kept one eye on the clock and the door. Then it happened. As the door opened again, Peter turned to welcome the new arrivals, only to feel his heart sink. Sherry stood in the doorway, her expression one of practiced calm, and beside her was Gerald, introduced casually to everyone as just a friend. Peter's breath hitched, his feelings of anger and disbelief intensifying. Despite the shock, he managed to stay composed, extending a handshake to Gerald with the same warmth he showed everyone else. The handshake was firm, his gaze locking onto Gerald's with an intensity that belied his outward calm. As introductions were made, Peter felt detached, as if watching the scene from afar, his thoughts consumed by betrayal and the necessity for justice. When Sherry's eyes met his, he glimpsed a flash of something, perhaps fear or remorse, before she quickly hid it behind a smile, ushering Gerald into the room and introducing him to their friends and family. Peter observed her closely, noticing the tension in her movements and her eyes scanning the room, possibly looking for reassurance. As the dinner bell rang, guests moved to the table, taking their seats amid cheerful conversation and laughter. Peter positioned himself at the head of the table, with Sherry next to him and Gerald seated further away. Despite the friendly and lively atmosphere, to Peter, each spoken word and every sound of clinking glasses felt like the echo of the storm raging inside him. Resolute to maintain control, Peter participated in the conversation, engaging with his guests while grappling with his turbulent emotions. His voice steady and even, he questioned Gerald about his profession, inquiring subtly with queries that held dual meanings known only to him and Sherry. So Peter began in a conversational tone, "I hear you're quite the traveler. What brings you to our part of the world?" Gerald, appearing unaware of the tension, smiled. "Oh, just visiting some old friends and meeting new ones," he answered smoothly. "It's always good to broaden one's horizons. Don't you think?" Peter nodded. "Indeed," he replied, his eyes briefly meeting Sherry's. "It's crucial to venture into new areas. Though one must be cautious not to overstep their bounds." The discussion went on, with Peter deftly steering it like the experienced lawyer he was, each query serving as a subtle indication of his awareness. He observed as Sherry became visibly more uneasy, her laughter forced and her replies terse. The guests, oblivious to the underlying strains, continued to enjoy the night, their conversations filling the air as the main dish was served. Amidst the escalating laughter and more frequent toasts as wine was poured liberally, the atmosphere seemed to lighten, yet the tension among Peter, Sherry and Gerald simmered beneath, a quiet conflict expressed through looks and unspoken words. Peter lifted his glass, calling for a toast. To family, he announced, his voice resonant, and to the ties that keep us united. Even in tough times, the guests toasted, echoing his sentiment, unaware of its deeper significance. As he drank his wine, Peter caught Sherry's eye, holding her look with firm, unwavering intensity. She looked away first, her poise briefly faltering, revealing a crack in her otherwise meticulously upheld facade. As dinner moved forward, Peter kept engaging Gerald, subtly weaving questions into their conversation that hinted at his awareness. "And how do you find the hospitality here, Gerald?" he asked, his voice gentle yet his gaze incisive. "Have you had the opportunity to fully experience what our community offers?" Gerald paused, a trace of hesitation crossing his face. "It's been quite welcoming, actually," he responded cautiously. "I'm thankful for the generosity I've encountered." "Generosity is significant," Peter agreed, his tone calm yet cool, "but trust is even more crucial, wouldn't you agree? Sherry at this, Sherry's fork clattered against her plate, drawing a few glances from the guests. She quickly regained her composure, offering a strained smile. Of course, Peter. Trust is the cornerstone of any relationship. As the meal progressed, Peter felt the weight of his emotions mounting like a tide ready to surge. The laughter and chatter of his guests became a distant murmur, the room seeming to narrow into a tunnel focused solely on Sherry and Gerald. Each mouthful of food seemed like a personal affront, every shared laugh a taunt mocking the facade he had to uphold. He had maintained the role of the gracious host for too long, and his patience was wearing thin. The clinking of wine glasses continued, and the alcohol's warmth in his blood brought him a sharp clarity, reinforcing his determination. He scanned the faces around the table, noting those he cared about, people unaware of the impending storm. His gaze settled on Sherry, who was deep in conversation with Gerald, her laughter strained and fragile. The sight of her so at ease with her deceit ignited a flame within him, a stark reminder of why he had to act to restore his dignity and the truth of his life. Peter stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. He lifted his glass, signaling for quiet. The room gradually stilled as conversations faded and all eyes turned to him. The air thickened with anticipation, the guests sensing that something significant was about to be revealed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Peter began, his voice steady and commanding, "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This gathering has always been a celebration of the bonds that unite us: family, friendship, loyalty." He paused, letting the words linger, their significance unmistakable, and most importantly, honesty. The room was silent, the tension palpable as guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what was unfolding. Peter's eyes swept over the table, pausing briefly on Gerald, who squirmed slightly, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Sherry's smile was fixed on her face, her eyes wide as she grasped the implications of his words. "In our lives," Peter continued, his voice gaining strength, "we often assume these values are implicit, inviolable. But sometimes we must face the harsh truth that not everyone upholds these principles." A murmur spread through the room, the guests sensing the tension, their attention now riveted on Peter, Sherry, and Gerald. The ensuing silence was profound, a collective breath held in anticipation of what was to come. With measured calm, Peter turned to Gerald, his eyes icy and probing. "Gerald," he said, his tone heavy with sarcasm, "you've certainly brought something unique to this table. I'd like to extend a special welcome to you, as it seems you've become quite familiar with our family." Gerald shifted uncomfortably, his confusion mingling with dawning realization. Before he could reply, Peter stepped forward smoothly, his movements precise. Without breaking eye contact, he reached for the bowl of tomato soup in front of Gerald, and, with a swift motion, overturned it into Gerald's lap. The steaming liquid splashed over him, drawing a shocked gasp from the guests. The room erupted into chaos, gasps and exclamations filling the air as guests rose from their seats, stunned by the sudden turn of events. The once serene dining room was now a tableau of confusion and disbelief, the clatter of cutlery and overturned chairs adding to the cacophony. "Well, welcome to the family," Peter said sarcastically. "I hope you both enjoy your last dinner together." He then dramatically submerged his own face into a bowl of hot tomato soup. Gerald stumbled backward, his expression a mix of outrage and humiliation, soup dripping from his chin and staining his clothes. He sputtered, trying to regain his composure, but the public humiliation had shattered his confidence. Peter stood resolute, his expression unreadable, a calm amidst the storm he had unleashed. His gaze flicked to Sherry, who sat frozen in her seat, her face pale as the reality of the situation sank in. The facade she had maintained for so long crumbled, and she felt the full weight of her actions bearing down on her, her cheeks flushed with shame. Initially shocked into silence, the guests began to murmur among themselves, their voices a mixture of sympathy for Peter and condemnation for Sherry and Gerald. Friends and family, who had known the couple for years, struggled to reconcile the scene before them with the image of the perfect couple they had always admired. Sherry stood, her voice trembling as she tried to regain control of the situation. "Peter, please, this isn't the time or place." Peter cut her off, his voice as sharp as a blade. "When then, Sherry? When is the right time to confront betrayal and deceit? In private, where it can fester unnoticed, or here, where the truth can finally be laid bare?" Tears welled in Sherry's eyes, her composure slipping further as she realized the depth of Peter's anger and hurt. She turned to Gerald, seeking some form of support, but found only his retreating figure, desperate to escape the scene. Guests began to gather their belongings, murmuring apologies and farewells as they left, giving Peter space to deal with the aftermath of his revelation. Some paused to offer a comforting word or a supportive pat on the shoulder, their loyalty evident in their actions. As the last of the guests departed, the house fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside. Peter remained upright, taking in the chaos of the evening, overturned chairs and spilled wine symbolizing the turmoil in his life. Sherry approached him, her tone uncertain and filled with regret. "Peter, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." Peter looked at her squarely, his expression unyielding. "Sorry isn't enough, Sherry. You've shattered the trust we built our life on, and it's going to take more than apologies to repair what's been broken." The confrontation had left a lasting mark on both of them, a stain that wouldn't easily fade. Yet, amidst the chaos, Peter felt a clear sense of direction and determination. He was ready to face this storm and come out stronger, adhering to the values he had always cherished. The dinner party was concluded, but the confrontation was merely the beginning. The road ahead was filled with uncertainties and tough decisions, but Peter was prepared to confront them, armed with the truth and resolute to reconstruct his life on his own terms. Peter Holloway stood amid the disorder, his heart still racing with adrenaline and emotion. He watched as the last of their friends vanished into the night, leaving behind a silence that was both deafening and overwhelming. The dinner party had come apart dramatically, and Peter knew there was no returning to how things had been. He focused on Sherry, who was near the window, her expression one of shock and remorse. The once confident woman now seemed diminished and fragile, her eyes brimming with tears yet unshed. Peter inhaled deeply, gathering the courage to address the woman he once thought he would share his life with. "We need to talk," Peter stated, his voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions within. Sherry nodded, her hands twisting anxiously as she followed him into the study, a room filled with books and memories, where Peter had built his career and, in a way, his life. The room now felt altered, shadowed by the events that had unfolded. Peter shut the door behind them, the sound of the latch clicking resonating in the quiet. He faced Sherry, his look one of pain and resolve. "I know everything, Sherry," he declared, his voice stripped of its former warmth. "I've seen the messages, the calls. I've known for months." Sherry's eyes widened in surprise, her mouth moving as she struggled to find the right words. "Peter, please let me explain." "You've had your chance to explain," Peter interrupted, his tone stern yet controlled. "You had every opportunity to come to me, to discuss whatever you were feeling, but you chose deceit instead." Sherry's shoulders sagged, and she took a deep, trembling breath. "I never wanted to hurt you. I got caught up in something I couldn't handle, and before I knew it, I was too deep in." Peter shook his head, his disappointment evident. "You made choices, Sherry. You put your desires above our marriage, above the trust we had. Do you realize what you've done?" She nodded, tears now streaming down her face. "I do, and I'm so sorry, Peter. I know I've hurt you, and I'll do anything to make it right." Peter's heart ached at the sight of her distress, but he steeled himself, knowing this confrontation was necessary. "Making it right might not be possible, Sherry. You've destroyed our foundation, and it's going to take more than words to rebuild it." As they continued to talk, Peter felt his anger begin to subside, replaced by a cold, deliberate clarity. He knew he couldn't let his emotions govern his decisions. His future, his career, and his reputation hinged on how he managed this crisis. "We need to talk about what happens next," Peter said, his voice resolute as he adopted the strategic approach that had always benefited him professionally. "We'll have to consider a separation and possibly a divorce." Sherry's expression fell at those words, but she nodded, acknowledging that there was no alternative route to take. "I'll do whatever you think is best, Peter. I just want to make things right," she said. Peter nodded, his mind already busy crafting a strategy. "We need to handle this discreetly. The last thing I want is for this to turn into public gossip. My career, our assets, everything must be managed with care." He spent the next few hours outlining his thoughts, weighing every possible scenario and outcome. He was fully aware of the legal ramifications, how their assets would be divided, and the potential impacts on his professional reputation. Every decision needed to be deliberate, every action thoughtfully orchestrated. The following morning, Peter met with his most reliable friends and colleagues, those who had supported him through numerous professional challenges. They convened in his office, a place of many triumphs and now the scene of a deeply personal struggle. "I need your advice," Peter began, his tone steady as he addressed the group. "I'm in a difficult situation, and I need to understand my options." His friends listened intently, providing insights and support. They discussed the possible legal proceedings, stressed the importance of confidentiality, and explored steps Peter could take to safeguard his interests. "Peter, you've always been the strategist," his friend Tom observed, leaning forward with a thoughtful look. "Use that to your advantage. You know how to navigate these waters better than anyone." Peter nodded, taking in their advice, reassured by the support network around him, ready to help him through the upcoming challenges. As the meeting concluded, Peter felt a renewed sense of purpose. The conflict at the dinner party had sparked a need for change. But now it was time to focus on the future. He was resolved to rebuild his life, to learn from this ordeal and emerge even stronger. That evening, sitting alone in his study, Peter allowed himself a moment to reflect. The path ahead was daunting, but he was prepared. He would meet each challenge with the same resolve that had brought him success in his legal career. With a deep breath, he rose from his chair, recognizing that the aftermath of the confrontation was not an end, but a new beginning, a chance to forge a new path leading towards healing and redemption. In the days following the confrontation, Peter Holloway delved deep into the specifics of his plan, driven by a desire for justice and closure. His legal acumen, refined through years of handling complex cases, was now his most valuable asset. He was not only intent on ending his marriage on his own terms, but also on ensuring that Gerald faced repercussions for his involvement. Peter's reputation and future depended on a meticulously devised strategy. Sitting in his study, surrounded by books and legal documents, Peter meticulously pieced together every detail he had learned about Gerald's business operations. He had long known that Gerald's reputation was unstable, on the verge of collapse, with rumors of unethical practices and dubious partnerships. Peter had previously ignored these whispers, but now he painstakingly compiled evidence, connecting the dots that would expose Gerald's wrongdoings. Financial records, email exchanges, and witness statements painted a condemning picture of corruption and deception. Peter knew that a well-timed revelation could destroy Gerald's career, ensuring he faced the consequences of his betrayal. With the evidence in hand, Peter contacted a trusted journalist, someone he knew would treat the story with integrity. He provided the information anonymously, ensuring that the downfall of Gerald would appear to come from an independent source, thus distancing himself from the direct repercussions. The story was too compelling to overlook, and Peter was aware that once it was published, Gerald's tarnished reputation would lead to investigations that would plague him for years. Gerald, once thriving, now faced those eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Peter observed from afar, his feelings a complicated blend of satisfaction and sadness. He had accomplished his goal, ensuring that Gerald and Sherry bore the consequences of their actions. Yet, while revenge was sweet, it did not fill the emptiness left by betrayal. It was simply a step towards his own recovery. As the world buzzed with the scandal, Peter concentrated on the next stage of his journey, rebuilding his life. The sting of betrayal persisted, but he resolved not to let it define him. Instead, he found comfort in the steadfast support of his friends and family, their presence soothing his bruised heart. He began reconnecting with old friends, those whose relationships had waned during the turbulent years of his marriage. Lunches, dinners, and casual gatherings gradually rekindled his connections with those who had once been central to his life, reminding him of the importance of genuine relationships based on trust and mutual respect. In his professional life, Peter discovered new purpose. His experiences provided him with a unique insight into trust and betrayal, which he used to guide others facing similar challenges. Clients in difficult situations benefited from Peter's empathy and expertise as he assisted them in navigating both personal and professional crises. His reputation as a lawyer, not only as a formidable opponent in court, but also as a compassionate advocate who deeply understood the intricacies of human relationships, grew. As months passed, Peter gradually found closure. His life, once overshadowed by a relationship ruined by deceit, now welcomed new opportunities and possibilities. He had confronted adversity and emerged stronger, his resilience proving his character and resolve. As the anniversary of the disastrous dinner neared, Peter reflected on the path he had traveled. The pain, though still present, was now more of a quiet murmur than a loud cry, a reminder of what he had endured and overcome. He learned to forgive himself for the bitterness and pain that had engulfed him, recognizing that healing was a process, not a destination. One afternoon, while sitting in a local coffee shop, Peter struck up a conversation with a woman at the next table. Her name was Beth, an artist with a warm smile and a sharp sense of humor. Their conversation flowed naturally, marked by laughter as they discussed art, literature, and the unpredictable turns of life. It was a serendipitous meeting, but as they exchanged numbers and planned to meet again, Peter sensed a spark of hope for the future. With Beth, Peter found a connection that was both revitalizing and promising. They spent time visiting galleries and attending book readings, their common interests laying the groundwork for what would evolve into a significant relationship. Beth's company reminded him that love, when built on trust and authenticity, could be a wellspring of joy and satisfaction. The narrative of Peter Holloway, once tainted by betrayal and sorrow, was now one of rejuvenation and resilience. He had navigated the complexities of his past, orchestrated his own justice, and emerged on the other side with a refreshed sense of purpose and optimism. His life was not defined by the betrayal he had suffered, but by the strength and resolve with which he faced it